Hi folks, I'm Lukasz Gornicki. I have this great privilege to be an executive director for AsyncAPI Initiative, but it's basically thanks to Postman that is paying me to do the work for the community. And today I wanted to talk to you about basically everything you, at least I assume you wanted to know about AsyncAPI Initiative. And the first topic, not sure if it's surprising for you or not, but the first topic I want to talk is about differences between AsyncAPI and OpenAPI. Because I was thinking, what you want to know about the initiative. So I started just checking some stats. And apparently AsyncAPI, OpenAPI is pretty hot, because in Google Search console that we have connected with our website, we can see that people in top 3 queries usually ask about what's the difference between AsyncAPI and OpenAPI. Also on docs level, we see that the most popular document that people read is actually the story of how AsyncAPI came from OpenAPI. It was basically an inspiration for AsyncAPI, the OpenAPI project. And last but not least, AsyncAPI blog. One of the top 3 articles so far, all time, is actually an article from Jesse from Solace about differences between AsyncAPI and OpenAPI. So yeah, let's talk about what you want to know. So the common stuff is that we both are part of a Linux Foundation. I think that's the only similarity. But yeah, it's basically IP of the project, and nobody using AsyncAPI or OpenAPI have to be worried that some venture capital at some point of time will change the license and start charging for AsyncAPI. So luckily, both projects are under the umbrella of Linux Foundation. One more thing where we're pretty similar, it's as I said at the beginning, AsyncAPI was inspired on OpenAPI. So the structure of the documents, when you look on OpenAPI and AsyncAPI, they have a lot of similarities, but with 3.0 that's going to change. Even in the spec, we no longer say that we plan to be in the structure of the document similar to OpenAPI. I think the most important thing, if it comes to the support of the spec, is the difference on the protocol level. So prior 3.1, in the OpenAPI spec, you could read that it's designed for RESTful APIs. Since 3.1, it still says that it's for HTTP protocol, while in AsyncAPI, in event-driven world, the circus has a lot of actors in it. Many different protocols. So AsyncAPI is designed to be protocol agnostic. It's not just for HTTP or just for Kafka. It has a feature called bindings that basically allows you to plug in whatever protocol you want to use with AsyncAPI. So that's pretty big difference with OpenAPI. Now, this is my favorite. Anyone, except of people that saw this presentation in the past, anyone knows what this picture represents? Yeah, why would you? But yeah, it's a round table. In Poland, we call it round table agreement. It took place in 1989, where, yeah, the communism was going away from the East Europe. And in Poland, that was communist country for many years, we had to do something to basically kick out communists, do democracy, but do it without bloodshed, where everyone are equal and can discuss things together. So this is actually a real picture of the round table where old communists, young Democrats, and different church representatives were sitting at the round table to make sure that nobody has more power at the table. Nobody perceives as a person at the table that it's on the top of the table, it's probably someone important. They all were super equal, discussing what's the future of the project of Polish country. So I like to compare AsyncAPI to this approach, because our approach at AsyncAPI is pretty unique also in open source, where Like we really put a lot of efforts in making sure that in the technical steering committee of the project, we valued in the same way people that come from Postman or IBM and people that are just individual contributors. Because like for us, it's important that we group people that want to take project further, evolve it in the future, and they just have the project in their minds, no special businesses. So that's how different it is from, I guess, OpenAPI, but I might be wrong. Last but not least, something that I like to always remind people of, AsyncAPI is very much different on the definition level of the initiative, because like OpenAPI Initiative, when it was formed, the goal was that it's a project that will take care of the OpenAPI specification only. No tools, nothing like that. It's just the spec and evolution of the spec. In AsyncAPI, we do both. So spec is important, but it's also important to provide a set of default tools that actually enable you to do something with this markdown document specification. So it's really important to remember at AsyncAPI, there's a like bazillion of different tools that support AsyncAPI, and yeah, it causes, of course, a lot of traffic in the project and a lot of work. Yeah, the growth, it's always the best to show some nice diagrams. So a bit of explanation for Jonas that told me that it's not so fancy diagram in the past. So just to explain others, because Jonas didn't get it. When you see these lines here, the dotted lines, it actually shows the previous year, the traffic on the AsyncAPI website. And not dotted line is showing like the current year. So it still looks like it's a peak. It's maybe not a very big peak, but like we steadily get up and go further with the project. But my favorites one are these ones that are very controversial, are statistics from NPM. Because whenever I show these diagrams and I say like, hey, like look, like React component, this year something happened with the community, like we have over 2 million downloads. And many people start saying like, yeah, it's probably bots and CIs downloading packages like crazy. But that's not the thing. That's not how NPM works. That's not how corporations work. Whenever corporation is using NPM, they always have infrastructure. They never download directly from NPM. And also on CI level, many CIs, by default, they also have cache. They don't let you download always directly from NPM. So that's why I more actually trust numbers from NPM than from Google, where people forget that there's a huge trend in the community where people start installing Google Analytics blockers or use browsers that block Google Analytics by default. Like I myself use Brave for over 2 years, and I'm not here at the diagram. The most important number, I think, is the AsyncAPI specs package on NPM. It's a really tiny package, but it's a backbone for anyone that wants to build Node.js tools. Because this package is exposing JSON schemas that describe AsyncAPI spec. So we can imagine, like this year, just we had over 12 million downloads, and it's just for Node. We don't expose a specific, like we have one for Go, but for other languages, we don't have too many packages that expose JSON schemas, so people have to access them directly from GitHub. So we're tracking just really a small portion of the community. And as I said, like, because more people come, we also have a lot of tools. It means more and more work every year, which is pretty visible in this diagram. When you see the blue line shows the increase in issues, history creation in the project, while the red one is pretty stable, like it's the amount of stuff we are able to handle and resolve. So these lines are getting more and more disconnected. which is good, of course, for the project, not that good for maintainers. Contributor strength, we put so much effort into making sure that contributors can really onboard to the project, contribute to the project. And it's always paying back. We can see that we're regularly increasing the number of contributors, but again, not that much with maintainers. So growth is nice, but let's be transparent and let's say what are our bigger pains. And there are two super big pains, at least from my perspective. The first one is, you could guess already, I'm referring to it pretty often, the lack of maintainers, which I think it's pretty common in open source. Companies and people, they're eager to contribute. It's easy to convince them to contribute, to push some code to upstream, but they're not so much happy with taking ownership of the code later and maintaining the code. So we're trying to change this side of the project, introducing different programs to solve it. Let's see how that goes in the future. The other one, which is super visible for me this year, because I had this goal this year to have as many as possible public case studies from different companies sharing how they use AsyncAPI. Yeah, the reality is that event-driven APIs people usually use for internal communication. So companies are not so happy to talk about how internal stuff work. It's pretty hard to get anything from people. But it doesn't mean we don't have end users. So I'm going to show you a list of companies that use AsyncAPI, but yeah, without logos, because it's not official. So, for example, we know that Raiffeisen Bank uses AsyncAPI for the infrastructure handling in the bank. And we know it just because some folks from Raiffeisen Bank could present at Pulsar Summit. And that's how we learned about them. Not sure if we ever will be able to put their logo on the website with a detailed case study. Lego, we know that Lego uses extensively AsyncAPI, also mainly for handling the self-service for the infrastructure. And in the end, as a side effect, documentation, of course, rendering. It's I'm already a few months in discussions for the case study. Yeah, maybe one day. Bank of New Zealand, for example, they presented at a Kafka Summit a few years ago. They're using AsyncAPI to enable the self-service internally between internal teams, how to share information about the events in their internal platform. But yeah, never managed to get the case study. Zora Robotics, it's a pretty cool company doing some robotic IoT. That's actually one of the exceptions from the rule that people keep it internal if it comes to API, event-driven API, because it's IoT. So obviously, the whole API that they will have is it's event-driven. So in case of Zora, you can actually go to their portal to see the AsyncAPI documents they have because they expose the MQTT API for their platform developers. In London, we learned that Adobe uses AsyncAPI for code generation and docs. We actually, 2 days before London event, we learned that one of the presenters that wanted to share how City uses AsyncAPI, he had to decline because, he was apparently sharing some super secret event-driven API information. So yeah, the talk had to be removed. But yeah, we're going to keep the conversation running. We know about Slack, but they're super old adopters. They even adopted 1.2 version of AsyncAPI. And last but not least, we also know that GitHub uses AsyncAPI. And we know it just because they, once a year, not sure if you're aware, they have this really nice approach that they elect projects internally at GitHub and then send some money to these projects through GitHub sponsors. So we're getting once a year some euro from them, but we don't exactly know why they're paying, where they actually use AsyncAPI. But there's this one the slide in the tunnel. Adio, very good and super cool open source citizen, a company from France that they were the first ones to actually share openly how much they use AsyncAPI. They actually shared a detailed case study that is on our website. So yeah, I hope that next year when I'll show you this slide, it's going to be just full of logos, not just names. The other things about not end users, but vendors. So we know that SAP builds event-related products using AsyncAPI for very long. We know that Google does the same. They actually have a Google Pops Up binding officially introduced to AsyncAPI spec. Salesforce, the same thing, especially endpoint and queue binding. AWS benefits a lot because they have like huge adoption of SNS and SQS protocols. A lot of community members also contribute the bindings in our project. And then there's IBM as well with IBM MQ, but not only. There's a guy from IBM who also helps maintaining the spec, and they helped organizing AsyncAPI event in London a few weeks ago. But the pain is that from the list of these logos, like it's just IBM who's really the sponsor of the project. So like I'm on my personal journey to actually change it, to have more sponsors, but so far the best sponsors are IBM and then a bit smaller players like Postman and Solace, who regularly are platinum sponsors. Now, if you go to Open Collective, to our account, and you see the estimated annual budget, it's like if we would have just one library, 2 developers, I think that would be a pretty nice budget. But it's a large project, spec and a lot of tools, $65,000. It's really not a lot, especially that we're very good at spending. So that's definitely something that has to change. But we're spending it well, you're going to see. So the painkillers. The painkillers that we can do as the initiative, as the community, are just the painkillers that we have, we can influence, we can actually control. So we are doing many different things, like AsyncAPI mentorship, where we actually pay mentees to do some work for the project. We actually, like now, we started paying out the first part of the grant from AsyncAPI mentorship. So it's like, I think this year we have like $18,000 assigned just to mentoring new folks in open source and tech. We also participate in things that, again, we can control. So GSOC, GSOT. Actually, we have a lot of budget assigned from Google Summer of Google Season of Docs. And we plan to also apply for this pretty hard word for me to say out loud, but it's like a German tech fund that is also supporting open source. So again, things that we can control. AsyncAPI ambassador. So we know there are many people out there talking about AsyncAPI, going to different conferences. Like from Adeo, there's one ambassador that regularly go to conferences in France talking about AsyncAPI. So we've organized a program, and we actually have an ambassador program lead here at the conference, Barbanio, who, if you want to talk to her later and become an ambassador, you should do it. So it's a program that helps us to connect all the ambassadors, give them something in exchange for talking about AsyncAPI, and basically bringing more ambassadors to the project. Actually, next week we start finally a regular bounty. We had a trial during the summer, so we are assigning $20,000 for the whole year. Again, to share money back from the sponsors with the community, and in this case, it's more focused on maintainers and regular contributors than like in case of mentorship when it's for early graduates or people that are new to open source. We managed also to save a bit to Open Collective. So even though we're part of Linux Foundation and we're just like under the umbrella of Linux Foundation, we didn't have a way like how to hire people that are independent. They're not just from Postman or IBM or whatever different company. So like this year we managed, thanks to Open Collective, to actually hire on a contract our community manager, Tuli, that actually made a lot of effort to make this conference happen. And last but not least, the conference on tour. So again, it's an initiative to, again, talk more about the project in different countries, to bring in more people, more companies, and possibly more case studies and the maintainers. But ending my talk, I think the community is the best painkiller. Whatever we plan to do, all these initiatives, they would not be able to exist and run if not the support of the community. Many of the initiatives I mentioned, they run by individuals to make the project better. So like my shout out to you, to the community, watching live or being here on the stage. Whenever you know that there's a company using AsyncAPI and is willing to talk about it, if you know that your company is having some funds to sponsor open source, let them know that there's this pretty cool AsyncAPI project that is the future of event-driven architectures. And you can ask me my email, they can reach me out, I can meet them, preach about the project, and get more people on the project. So yeah, for more, go to our website, join Slack. You'll easily find me also in one of these channels. If you want to talk to me directly, not in public, that's completely fine. But yeah, let's stay connected. Thank you. We're not doing questions, or are we doing questions? Because we have still time, right? Anyone has any questions? Or in the... Okay. Because there's a delay on the stream, right? Yeah?
One question. For this effort of bringing new case studies, is a community effort, or is just mainly you or some people in the community, like, or everyone is just able to engage with the companies and point to the right direction inside the project? Or?
Yeah, so like, so there's a, in the website we have a template that anyone can actually take and talk to the companies. But I mean, I'm fully engaged into it because I know that like it's much easier when you actually get on a call with someone, you pick the knowledge from someone than expecting that someone will actually provide the information on their own. So even though we have a template, it doesn't work this way that people on their own come in and talk about AsyncAPI. But although I don't think it's just about it's internal, it's also probably people think it's not that important for us. So I'm mainly now engaged in this case study collection, but yeah, definitely I don't think it's going to scale in the future. So I hope that once we collect few, we have a good example that we can engage with other. Yeah. I'm also trying to convince the companies that sponsor the project that it's like completely fine if they will talk to their customers, share the case studies, share example AsyncAPI documents, and if somewhere in the text they will say that part of the issue they solve with this commercial product, it's not a commercial, it's nothing bad. It's actually still a good knowledge for the community, like how certain issues are solved using AsyncAPI. So that's something I also started talking with the sponsors. Okay, I don't think there are any questions in the chat. So I'd like to just finish with like huge shout out to Tuli and Ivan. Like I don't think, like, without them, I don't think we would be able to be here and do this live stream. So, like, super cool. Thank you.